She didn't call out. At her age, she had learned that the world doesn't always hear you anymore. Under the heavy summer sun, her strength faded quietly. No words, no cries. But the dog stayed. He stood in the road, tired, shaking, unmoving, as if he knew that leaving was not an option. Because some bonds don't need voices. They are built over years of walking together, and they speak only when everything else falls silent. And that day, while the world rushed past, one old heart was calling, and one loyal soul answered. The summer heat pressed down on the road like a weight that refused to lift. The asphalt stretched through the outskirts of a quiet American town, pale and cracked, bordered by dry weeds and fading grass that whispered whenever the wind dared to move. The air shimmered, bending the horizon. Even the cicadas sounded tired, their buzzing heavy and relentless in the heat. Cooper stood alone in the middle of the road. He was a golden retriever, a little over 6 years old, his once glowing coat dulled by dust and sun. His fur, a deep honey gold, was tangled around his chest and legs, carrying the signs of long days outdoors. He was lean for his breed, not weak, but shaped by routine walks rather than play. One ear drooped slightly more than the other, giving his face a permanent look of concern. His brown eyes were dark, alert, and fixed straight ahead. The car came faster than it should have. Inside the sedan sat Sarah Whitman, 34, her hands resting stiffly on the steering wheel. She was tall and slender, with narrow shoulders and long arms that made her seem fragile at first glance. Her skin was pale, dotted with faint freckles earned during childhood summers she barely remembered enjoying. Dark brown hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, practical and loose, strands clinging to her neck from sweat. Sarah had learned to move through life quietly. She worked long hours at a neighborhood pharmacy, covering extra shifts because she didn't know how to say no. Since her father's sudden death 3 years earlier, responsibility had become her default state. She avoided confrontation, avoided attachment, avoided anything that might hurt when it left. That afternoon, exhaustion sat behind her eyes, dull and constant. She noticed Cooper only when it was almost too late. "What?" she gasped, slamming her foot on the brake. The car screeched, rubber screaming against the overheated pavement. The hood dipped sharply as the vehicle stopped just a few feet from the dog. Cooper didn't flinch. He stood his ground, paws planted wide, nails scraping lightly against the asphalt. He barked, not a playful sound, not aggressive. It was sharp, urgent, almost commanding. "Are you serious?" Sarah whispered, heart racing. A horn blared behind her, then another, the quiet road filled with irritation and confusion. Cooper barked again and took 2 steps forward, then retreated back to the center of the lane, placing himself squarely in front of the car. Sarah noticed his tail. It wasn't wagging. It wasn't tucked. It was low and rigid, tight with tension. "He's not trying to attack," she thought. "He's trying to stop me." She glanced in the rearview mirror. Cars were stacking up now. A pickup truck sat directly behind her, its driver leaning forward impatiently. Another sedan idled behind that, heat waves rising from its hood. "Move the dog," someone shouted. Sarah hesitated, then opened her door. The heat hit her immediately, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. She stepped onto the road, shielding her eyes as she looked at Cooper. Up close, She could see how thin he was beneath the fur, ribs faintly visible when he shifted his weight. His tongue hung dry from his mouth, breath coming fast and shallow. "Hey," she said softly, holding her palms out. "Hey, boy, it's okay." Cooper barked again, louder this time, but not at her. He turned sharply and ran several steps toward the shoulder of the road, stopping near the tall grass. He looked back at her, eyes intense, and barked once more. Then he ran back into the road. Sarah's stomach tightened. That's not normal. She took a cautious step forward. Cooper retreated again, leading her with deliberate movements, then returned to block the lane, as if afraid the moment would slip away if he didn't hold it in place. "Ma'am," the pickup truck driver called out. He was a broad man in his 40s, sunburned, with a thick beard and forearms shaped by years of physical work. His voice held frustration more than anger. "You planning to stand there all day?" "I think something's wrong," Sarah replied, unsure why she said it out loud. He scoffed. "It's a dog, wants attention." But Cooper barked again, sharper, then sprinted toward the roadside with renewed urgency, disappearing briefly into the weeds before stopping and turning back. Sarah remembered something then. Her father's voice, years ago, standing in the doorway of the garage when she'd ignored a strange noise because she didn't want to deal with it. If something feels wrong, it usually is. She closed her car door. "Just a second," she said, though no one asked. She followed Cooper. The grass was dry and brittle beneath her shoes, crunching with every step. Heat rose from the ground, carrying the smell of dust and sun-baked earth. Cooper slowed his pace, glancing back repeatedly to make sure she was still there. His movements were frantic, but controlled, like he knew exactly where he needed her to go. Cars behind her honked again. Sarah ignored them. She reached the edge of the road, where the weeds grew tall and unkempt, forming a narrow wall of green and brown. The air felt slightly cooler there, shaded by nothing more than the illusion of cover. Cooper stopped. He stood beside the grass, chest heaving, eyes fixed on Sarah. His bark this time was softer, almost pleading. Sarah looked down. Nothing. Just weeds. Dirt. Dry ground. She frowned, heart pounding, and took another step closer. And that was when she realized Cooper wasn't blocking the road out of fear or confusion. He was guarding something hidden just beyond the edge of the asphalt, in a small, overlooked corner where no one ever looked unless they were led there. Sarah swallowed hard. Cooper stepped aside, just enough to clear the path, and turned his head toward the thick grass, waiting. The grass parted beneath Sarah's trembling hands, revealing a body folded awkwardly into the shallow shade beside the road. The woman was elderly, small-framed, her limbs thin, as if time itself had slowly carved her down. Wisps of white hair clung damply to her forehead and temples, matted by sweat. Her skin was pale, too pale stretched tight over fragile bones, with a faint grayish tone that made Sarah's breath hitch. One arm lay twisted against the dirt, the other curled weakly toward her chest. Her lips were dry and cracked, barely parted as she struggled to draw shallow, uneven breaths. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. She dropped to her knees without thinking, the heat of the ground seeping through her jeans. Up close, the woman looked even more vulnerable, as if she had simply slipped out of the world and no one had noticed. Sarah pressed 2 fingers to the woman's neck, relief crashing through her when she felt a faint pulse. She's alive. She's still alive. Cooper rushed in beside her, his movements frantic now that the secret was exposed. He lowered his body against the woman's side, pressing close, whining softly. His tongue brushed over the woman's fingers again and again, as if he were afraid she might disappear if he stopped. His chest rose and fell rapidly, sides heaving from heat and fear. "You did this, didn't you?" Sarah murmured, voice breaking as she looked at him. "You were trying to get help." Cooper's eyes flicked up to hers, wide, shining, desperate, then back to the woman. He whined again, tail stiff, body tense. Sarah fumbled for her phone, nearly dropping it as her fingers shook. 911, what's your emergency?" "There's an elderly woman collapsed on the side of the road," Sarah said quickly, forcing herself to sound calm. "She's breathing, but barely. It's extremely hot. We're on County Road 12, near the old mailbox bend." "Is she conscious?" "No." "Stay with her. Help is on the way." Sarah ended the call and immediately slipped off her light jacket, folding it carefully beneath the woman's head. She shifted her body to cast as much shade as possible, though the sun was relentless. Sweat rolled down her spine, but she didn't move away. Cooper watched every movement, eyes never leaving the woman's face. Behind them, the road erupted into noise. A car door slammed, then another. "What the hell is going on?" someone called out. The pickup truck driver approached first. Up close, he looked rougher than Sarah had expected, thick beard streaked with gray, skin weathered and deeply tanned. His eyes, however, softened the moment he saw the woman on the ground. "Jesus," he muttered. "She just fell?" "I think it was heat," Sarah said. "She must have been walking with him." Another woman appeared behind him, shorter, with curly red hair and a worried frown. "Should we move her?" "No," Sarah said quickly. "They told me not to." The small crowd fell into uneasy silence. No one spoke. No one complained anymore. Minutes stretched, heavy and slow. Cooper shifted restlessly, lifting his head at every distant sound. When a siren finally cut through the air, faint at first, he barked once, sharp, high, and stood abruptly. His whole body seemed to lean toward the sound, as if he were trying to pull it closer by sheer will. The ambulance arrived in a rush of noise and movement. 2 paramedics jumped out. One was a tall man in his late 30s, dark hair cropped short, jaw angular and clean-shaven. His expression was focused, practiced. The other was a woman, slightly younger, with a calm face and quick hands, her brown hair tucked tightly under her cap. They moved fast. "She's overheated," the male paramedic said after a brief check. "Severe dehydration. Let's get her cooled down now." They worked efficiently oxygen mask, IV line, cool packs, while Sarah backed away, heart pounding. Cooper tried to follow them, but one of the paramedics gently blocked him. "Easy, boy," Cooper barked sharply, panic flaring. He circled the stretcher, whining, trying to press himself against the woman's side. "That's her dog," Sarah said. "He's been with her the whole time." The female paramedic glanced at Cooper, then at the woman, then nodded. "Okay, just careful." They loaded the woman onto the stretcher. As they lifted her, Cooper jumped, paws scraping against the metal frame, desperate not to be left behind. Sarah grabbed his collar instinctively, fingers sinking into the warm, rough fur. "It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure it was true. "They're helping her." The stretcher slid into the ambulance. The doors closed with a heavy, final sound. Cooper lunged forward. "Wait!" Sarah called, heart racing. He's her dog." The male paramedic hesitated, then shook his head slightly. "We can't take him. Hospital policy." The engine roared to life. Cooper stood frozen for half a second, staring at the closed doors. Then he barked, loud, broken, and pulled hard against Sarah's grip. She nearly lost hold of him as the ambulance began to move. "Cooper!" she cried, surprised that the name came so easily. The ambulance sped away, siren wailing, disappearing down the road. The sound faded. Cooper stopped struggling. He stood rigid, eyes locked on the empty stretch of asphalt where the vehicle had vanished. His ears drooped slowly, his body sagging as if something essential had been torn from him. A low whine slipped from his throat, barely audible. Sarah loosened her grip but didn't let go. "I'm sorry," she whispered, throat tight. "I didn't know what else to do." Cooper didn't look at her. He took a single step forward, then another, moving toward the road as if he still believed he could catch up. Sarah followed, heart heavy, as the crowd slowly dispersed and the heat closed in again, leaving behind only a dog, a woman, and the long, empty road. Cooper ran until the sound of the siren faded into nothing. His paws slapped against the burning pavement, breath tearing in and out of his chest heaving as the ambulance grew smaller, then disappeared entirely. He didn't understand distance or speed, only that the thing carrying his person was leaving, and leaving meant danger. When his legs finally gave out, he stumbled, skidding to a stop near the edge of the road. His tongue hung dry and heavy from his mouth. The world spun. Still, he stared down the empty stretch of asphalt long after the noise was gone. Sarah found him a few minutes later. She was breathing hard herself, sweat darkening the fabric of her shirt. Standing there in the heat, she looked even slimmer than before, her tall frame slightly hunched, as if the weight of the moment pressed physically on her shoulders. Her brown hair had come loose from its tie, strands clinging to her damp cheeks. She knelt beside Cooper without speaking, careful not to startle him. "It's gone," she said softly, "but we can follow." Cooper lifted his head at the sound of her voice. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, but something sparked there. Recognition, hope, need. He tried to stand and failed, legs trembling violently. Sarah swallowed hard. She had no plan. She had only a feeling, one she hadn't trusted in years, that walking away would be wrong. She helped Cooper into the back seat of her car, laying her jacket beneath him. The ride to the hospital was quiet, except for the hum of the engine and Cooper's shallow breathing. He stared out the window the entire time, as if expecting the ambulance to reappear on the road ahead. The hospital rose from the heat like a block of white concrete and glass, its automatic doors opening and closing in steady rhythm. Sarah parked, helped Cooper out, and guided him to a shaded patch near the entrance. The cool air spilling from inside brushed his fur, and he flinched, stepping closer to the doors. Inside, the woman at the front desk had tired eyes and a practiced calm. She listened as Sarah explained, nodding slowly. "She's stable," she said, "but unconscious. Heat stroke. It could take time." "How long?" Sarah asked. The woman didn't answer directly. "You can wait." So Cooper waited. The first night, he lay near the doors, body stretched out, chin resting on his paws. His fur was stiff with sweat and dust. darker along his chest and legs. He didn't sleep much. Each time the doors opened, his head snapped up, ears lifting, eyes searching every face that passed through. People noticed him. A janitor with a hunched back and kind eyes stopped to leave a bowl of water nearby. Cooper sniffed it once and turned away. A security guard, a broad man with closely cropped hair and a stern expression softened by concern, knelt briefly and tried to coax him with a treat. Cooper ignored it, gaze fixed on the doors. By the second day, his movements slowed. The heat lingered even after sunset, trapped in the concrete. Cooper curled himself into a tight shape on the ground, ribs rising and falling shallowly. His paws twitched in his sleep, as if he were still running. When morning came, he didn't lift his head. Sarah came back every evening after work. She brought water, sometimes food. She sat beside him, back against the wall, talking quietly about nothing, about customers who complained, about the way the heat made everything feel heavier than it should. She didn't expect him to understand. She spoke because silence felt too close to giving up. "You don't have to be alone," she told him one night, fingers brushing gently over his matted fur. Cooper didn't respond, but he leaned into the touch, just slightly. Inside the hospital, time stretched strangely. Doctors came and went. Nurses spoke in careful tones. When Sarah asked about Helen, the answers were always the same. No change, still unconscious, waiting. Waiting. On the third night, a young nurse stepped outside during her break. She was small, with soft features and tired eyes, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun. She crouched near Cooper, careful and slow. "He hasn't moved much," she said quietly, "but he listens." Cooper lifted his head at the sound of her voice. The nurse smiled faintly. "She was brought in just in time," she added. "If he hadn't stopped those cars." Her voice trailed off. Cooper's ears twitched. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the tone, the acknowledgement. He shifted closer to the doors, resting his chin against the cool glass. As night fell again, the lights inside dimmed. The hospital grew quieter. Sarah sat with Cooper until exhaustion pulled her home, though leaving felt like betrayal. When she stood, Cooper's eyes followed her, confusion flickering across his face. "I'll be back," she promised. "I won't leave you." After she was gone, Cooper remained. He lay curled on the concrete, body tense even in rest. The night breeze barely touched the heat radiating from the ground. Somewhere inside, machines hummed steadily. Somewhere behind those walls, his person slept without knowing how close he was. Cooper closed his eyes, but only halfway. As if fully resting might mean missing the moment the doors finally opened for her. The outage came without warning, as if the heat itself had finally overwhelmed the city. It was late afternoon when the lights flickered and died, one floor at a time. The hospital's air conditioning cut out with a low, fading hum, replaced by a heavy stillness that pressed against walls and lungs alike. Windows sealed tight against the heat trapped the air inside, and within minutes the building felt like a sealed box left under the sun. Outside, Cooper lifted his head. He had learned the rhythms of the place, the sound of carts rolling, the sigh of automatic doors, the subtle change in tone when something wasn't right. This time, it was different. The doors stuttered mid-open, then froze. A faint alarm chirped somewhere inside, then went quiet. Cooper stood, his body tensed, every muscle alert. His fur, still dusty and tangled from days of waiting, bristled along his spine. He paced once, twice, then let out a sharp bark that echoed against the glass. Inside, Emily Ross, a senior nurse in her early 40s, paused mid-step. She was medium height with squared shoulders, her dark hair pulled tightly into a bun streaked with early gray. Years in emergency care had shaped her posture and her instincts, calm, efficient, but never careless. She turned toward the sound, frowning. "That dog again," someone muttered nearby. Cooper barked louder. Emily walked to the doors and looked down at him. His eyes were locked on her, intense and unblinking. He barked again, then turned and ran down the corridor as soon as the doors finally slid open with backup power. "Hey!" Emily called. Cooper didn't hesitate. His paws struck the floor in fast, determined beats as he moved deeper into the hospital, nose low, body cutting straight through the unfamiliar space as if he had always known the way. Emily swore under her breath and followed. The corridors were dim now, emergency lights casting everything in a dull red glow. Machines beeped unevenly. Somewhere, a patient cried out in confusion. The heat was already building, thick and suffocating. Cooper stopped abruptly outside the intensive care unit. He barked loud, urgent, relentless, throwing his weight against the closed door. His tail was stiff, his chest heaving. He barked again, then again, refusing to be ignored. Emily reached the door just as Dr. Michael Harris appeared from the opposite end of the hall. Michael was in his early 50s, tall with a lean build and sharp features softened by exhaustion. His hair, once dark, had gone mostly gray, and a trimmed beard lined a jaw that had clenched through too many long nights. He had lost a patient years ago during a similar outage, a moment that had carved caution deep into his bones. "What's going on?" he asked. Before Emily could answer, a warning alarm shrilled from inside the ICU. Michael's expression changed instantly. They rushed in. Inside, the room was stifling. Backup generators hummed weakly, but not everything had switched over. One of the monitors flickered erratically. A ventilator stuttered, its rhythm uneven. On the bed lay Helen. Her face was pale, eyes closed, chest rising shallowly beneath the thin hospital sheet. Sweat beaded along her temples. Her vitals wavered on the screen. Michael moved fast. "The support system isn't stabilizing. Get manual ventilation now." Emily acted without hesitation. As they worked, Cooper stood rigid at the foot of the bed, barking once more, then stopping, as if he sensed the danger had been seen. He didn't move closer. He didn't whine. He watched, every ounce of his focus fixed on Helen's face. Minutes stretched thin. The ventilator stabilized. The monitor steadied. The backup power kicked fully online with a low surge, lights brightening fractionally as the system regained control. Michael exhaled slowly. "That was close," Emily said quietly. Michael nodded, eyes lingering on Helen. Too close. Only then did he notice Cooper. The dog stood motionless, sides heaving, tongue lolling slightly as the tension drained from his body. His paws were planted as if he had rooted himself to the floor. Michael crouched slowly, careful not to startle him. "You again," he murmured. "You don't miss much, do you?" Cooper didn't respond. He simply stepped forward, gently resting his head against the edge of the bed. Sarah arrived moments later, breathless. She looked worn, dark circles beneath her eyes, hair pulled into a rushed ponytail, her slim frame wrapped in a light blouse, damp with sweat. But when she saw Cooper standing there, calm at last, relief washed over her face. "What happened?" she asked. Emily explained briefly. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. She stared at Cooper, disbelief and awe tangling in her chest. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew something was wrong." Michael straightened. He may have saved her. Cooper slowly lowered himself to the floor beside the bed, curling into a tight shape. His breathing evened. His eyes closed halfway, the way they did when he allowed himself to rest, but only just. Helen remained unconscious, but she was alive. And this time, the danger had passed. The words settled into the room like dust that refused to fall. Dr. Michael Harris stood at the foot of Helen's bed, hands clasped loosely in front of him, shoulders slightly rounded with the weight of what he had to say. Under the fluorescent lights, the lines at the corners of his eyes looked deeper than before. He had learned, over decades in critical care, how to speak gently without offering false hope. "If she doesn't regain consciousness within the next 24 hours, he said, voice steady but low, the chances of recovery drop sharply. Sarah felt the sentence land somewhere behind her ribs. She stood close to the bed, tall and narrow, her posture stiff as if movement might break something fragile in the air. Her brown hair was tied back again, but less carefully this time. Loose strands brushed her cheeks. The freckles on her pale skin stood out under the harsh light, and the dark circles beneath her eyes told the story of nights spent on hard chairs and little sleep. She nodded, because nodding was easier than speaking. Around them, the ICU moved in its quiet, mechanical rhythm. Monitors hummed, machines breathed. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and was quickly silenced. Life continued, indifferent to the invisible line Helen now lay against. Cooper did not look at the doctor. He had climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed, placing his front paws near Helen's side with a gentleness that seemed impossible for his size. His fur was warm, still carrying the heat of the long days outside. He lowered his head and rested it against Helen's hand, fitting himself there, as if the space had always belonged to him. His breathing slowed. In, out, in, out. It was a sound Sarah had come to recognize, the sound Cooper made when he believed he was doing something important. His eyes were half closed, focused inward, his body pressed close enough to share warmth without causing discomfort. "He won't leave," Emily Ross said quietly from the doorway. The nurse looked tired, her squared shoulders slumped slightly now that the emergency had passed. She held a clipboard against her chest, fingers curled tightly around its edge. Experience had taught her to keep distance, but compassion made her linger. "We've tried," she added. "He growls if we move him. Not aggressive. Just firm." Michael watched Cooper for a moment longer than necessary. Then he nodded once. "Let him stay." Sarah exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Hours passed. The light outside shifted from afternoon glare to the muted gold of early evening. Shadows stretched across the floor. The temperature inside stabilized, but the tension did not ease. Every small change, a flicker on a monitor, a twitch of Helen's fingers, sent Sarah's heart racing. Nothing came. At one point, a man paused at the door. He was in his early 60s, tall but stooped, with thinning gray hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. His clothes were plain, his posture careful, as if he had learned to make himself small in places filled with grief. He was a hospital volunteer, someone who had lost a wife years ago and returned each week because quiet rooms felt less lonely when shared. He looked at Cooper and Helen, then at Sarah. "That's some dog," he said softly. Sarah nodded. "He saved her." The man's eyes softened. "Then she's not alone." Night settled fully. Sarah remained in the chair beside the bed, legs crossed tightly, hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. She watched Cooper more than she watched the monitors, the way his ears twitched at every sound, the way his paw shifted, adjusting to keep contact with Helen's skin, the way his eyes opened just enough whenever someone entered the room. "She can hear you," Emily said at one point, stopping beside Sarah. "Sometimes people still hear, even when they can't answer." Sarah hesitated. She leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "Helen," she said, feeling strange using the name out loud. "You don't know me, but Cooper, he's been waiting for you. He hasn't left this place once." Cooper's ear flicked. Sarah swallowed. "If you can hear me, you don't have to do anything big. Just come back to him." She leaned back again, ashamed of the tears burning her eyes. Time thinned. At some point near dawn, a doctor checked Helen's vitals and shook his head almost imperceptibly. The numbers held, but only just. The line was still there, fragile, narrow, unforgiving. Cooper shifted then. He lifted his head slowly and pressed it more firmly against Helen's hand. His nose brushed her skin. A low sound vibrated in his chest. Not quite a whine, not quite a growl. It was rhythmic, intentional, a hum. Sarah looked up sharply. Cooper continued, the sound steady and soft, rising and falling with his breath. His tail thumped once against the mattress, then stilled. He didn't look at anyone. He focused entirely on Helen, as if he were reminding her of something familiar. The room held its breath. Helen did not move, but Cooper did not stop. Morning arrived quietly, without ceremony. The ICU was wrapped in a pale blue light as dawn filtered through the narrow window. The machines continued their steady rhythm, indifferent to the hour. The night had been long, too long, and everyone in the room moved as if afraid to disturb something fragile that had barely survived the dark. Sarah sat in the same chair she had occupied for hours, her tall, slender frame folded inward now, shoulders rounded with exhaustion. Her brown hair had slipped free from its tie again, falling in soft strands around her face. Her skin looked almost translucent under the hospital lights, freckles faint against the pallor of sleeplessness. She hadn't left. Not once. Not even when her legs cramped or her eyes burned. Across from her, Cooper lay beside the bed. His body was pressed close to Helen's side, his golden fur dulled and rough from days of waiting. He looked older now. 6 years of loyalty compressed into a single still shape. His breathing was slow and deliberate, each rise and fall measured, as if he were pacing the world itself. One paw rested lightly against Helen's wrist, the contact constant. The hum he had made during the night had faded, but his focus had not. Dr. Michael Harris entered the room with quiet steps. In the early light, the lines on his face seemed deeper, his trimmed beard flecked more clearly with gray. He checked the monitors without speaking, his sharp eyes scanning numbers that had refused to change for far too long. He had learned, over decades, not to hope too loudly. Emily Ross followed him in, her posture straight but tired, clipboard tucked under one arm. She glanced first at Helen, then at Cooper, then at Sarah. There was something different in the room, something that made her pause. Helen's fingers twitched. It was subtle, barely more than a ripple beneath thin skin, but Cooper felt it immediately. His head lifted. The room seemed to hold its breath. Helen's eyelids fluttered, once, then again. Her breathing changed, no longer shallow, but searching, as if she were surfacing from deep water. A faint sound escaped her throat, fragile and uncertain. "Helen?" Sarah whispered, barely daring to use the name. Cooper stood abruptly, nails clicking softly against the floor. His tail froze mid-air, then began to wag, slowly at first, then faster, faster, his entire body trembling with restrained disbelief. Helen's eyes opened. They were cloudy, unfocused, but alive. Her gaze drifted, confusion passing briefly over her face before settling on the shape beside her bed. Her lips moved again, forming a sound that took effort, memory, will. Cooper. It was barely louder than breath, but it was his name. Cooper let out a sound that wasn't a bark and wasn't a whine, something broken and joyful all at once. He surged forward, careful even in his excitement, placing his head against Helen's chest, tail sweeping the air in wide arcs. His eyes shone, wet and bright, as if every moment of waiting had finally found its answer. Helen's hand lifted, trembling, and rested against his fur. "There you are," she murmured, voice thin but certain. Sarah covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now, unchecked. She had witnessed illness before, loss before, but never this. Never the way a single name could pull someone back across a line no machine could cross. Dr. Harris moved in quickly, professional instincts snapping into place. He checked Helen's pupils, her vitals, his expression shifting from cautious disbelief to measured relief. "She's responding," he said quietly. "She's back." Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Helen's condition stabilized steadily after that. Not instantly, not miraculously, but undeniably. Her vitals strengthened, her breathing deepened. The danger, the one that had hovered so close, receded. Cooper stayed with her through it all. He lay beside the bed again once the excitement settled, his head resting near her shoulder, his presence calm now, complete. He slept deeply for the first time in days, his body finally allowing rest. By midday, word spread. A nurse mentioned it to another. A security guard told a visitor. A volunteer shared it quietly with a family in the waiting room. Soon, people were asking about the dog, the one who had blocked traffic, the one who had waited, the one who had barked at the right moment. By evening, the story reached beyond the hospital walls. Sarah stood by the window, watching the sun sink lower, painting the sky in soft gold and pink. She felt different, not healed, not changed entirely, but shifted. As if something inside her had loosened, just enough to let warmth in again. Dr. Harris joined her briefly. "You know," he said, gaze drifting to Cooper and Helen, "medicine can do a lot, but not that." Sarah nodded. Cooper lifted his head, sensing her eyes on him. His tail thumped once, lazily. Helen slept. But this time, it was the sleep of someone who intended to wake. And in that quiet room, on an ordinary morning, made extraordinary, everyone understood the same truth. That sometimes, loyalty doesn't just wait. Sometimes, it calls a heart back home. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes, they come quietly, on 4 tired legs, in the middle of an ordinary road, refusing to walk away. God often answers prayers through the smallest hearts, through loyalty that does not ask questions, through love that stays, even when hope feels fragile. In our daily lives, we pass countless moments where we can choose to look away or choose to stop. A kind act, a patient heart, a decision to care when it would be easier not to. Maybe that is how miracles begin. If this story touched you, take a moment to share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to honor the loyal souls, human or animal, who changed your life. And subscribe to the channel so more stories of compassion can reach hearts around the world. May God bless you, protect you, and guide your steps. May He watch over you and those you love. And may no act of love, no matter how small, ever be wasted. Amen.